MestreCast, analytical chemistry software in a fast-changing world with Santi Dominguez.
So, hi everyone, this is Santi Dominguez, and this is the Mestre Lab Rise of the Robots series of podcasts. You may be aware that this is episode number 7, and if that's the case, hopefully you have listened to the previous ones. Or you may be arriving at the podcast for the first time, in which case maybe what I will tell you very quickly is that we are aiming to do a podcast around automation and techniques to accelerate research, discovery, manufacturing, etc., mainly in the life sciences industries, which is where Mestre Lab obviously operates as a company. And again, if you have been following the series, we started with a few members of the Mestre Lab team, but now we are casting the net wider by talking to partners, collaborators, and customers as well. So this is a little bit of switching gears. And today we are switching gears also from another perspective, which is that I think we are widening a little bit the concept of automation when we talk about it. So for that, we have with us today Torsten Ostus. And Torsten, I've known about you for quite a while, Torsten. My paths have crossed with yours in different ways for a number of years in the industry. And for the last 18 months or so, we're maybe working together a little closer. But if I had to define you in a few words, I would probably say that you are a forward-thinking entrepreneur in the life sciences digitalization space. I don't know how fair that is, and you're going to tell me whether I'm over-reducing in a minute. Maybe let's start there with a little bit of your background, but just so that the audience also knows, I'm in the UK today, so I'm talking from the UK. Whereabouts are you geographically right now, Torsten?
Yeah, I'm here talking from Germany. So Aachen, Aix-la-Chapelle, Aachen near the Netherlands and Belgian border.
Yes, which, by the way, has a beautiful cathedral, as I found, and a beautiful town hall, as I found when I was there not about a year ago. And very relevant to European history, right, with the whole Charlemagne connection, etc. So I do encourage all the listeners to take a look at Aachen online if they don't know it. So Torsten, maybe just to start, we're dealing with automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, and digitalization in the field of life sciences, which, as I said, is where our companies operate, and it's a subject which is actually very interesting and has been very interesting to me for many years. Could you maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and how your background and experience are relevant to these topics so that the audience knows why they should listen?
Sure. And I could talk a lot about this, so please stop me if it's too long.
Don't worry, I will do.
Yes, maybe one thing that only a few people know. Before I started my first company, and it was end of the 90s, so Oslos GmbH, I did my PhD in machine automation.
Wow, okay.
So automation was my PhD, and we worked as a team in addition on production automation with neural networks.
And this is early days relatively early days for neural networks, right? I think neural networks originated in the 60s, but the 90s were still, I think, quite early days. And in fact, interesting, I don't know whether you saw it, but the Nobel Prize has just gone to the guys that kind of developed the concept of neural networks, right? The Physics Nobel Prize, which I thought was very exciting 2 or 3 days ago.
Oh no, I didn't know that. And,
yes.
But funny enough was so neural networks was something very innovative, and when AI started, I learned that AI is just the new word of neural networks and large language models. So it's interesting, and I think with the infrastructure and all the technology infrastructure capabilities, it has a much larger scale now and capabilities. So it's really exciting for me to see this. But finally, what's interesting to me is the combination, so that you combine the automation of processes, which has a mechanical part, or let's say industrial part, and then we have the AI part. And bringing these pieces together, I think this is a very, very strong capability. And we did this in our research, but today I think this is going to be industrialized, and that's why I think it's a great progress that's coming up now. So this was one really one part. And if you talk about digitalization, so digitalization came up from this topic came up for me in 2013 and 14. So in 2013, we as a very small company at that time, we won the Allotrope Foundation project of developing the Allotrope data standard.
Okay, and this is, I mean, we jump from obviously the late 90s when you were researching and getting your PhD in machine automation. You then created this company, right? Which I think is it right to say is Ostus? So it was named after
yes.
named Ostus GmbH, I think, right? So it was named after yourself, and so the company built for that period in the early 2000s until 2013, and then Allotrope comes in, right? And maybe you can take the chance to just very quickly explain what the Allotrope initiative is for those in the audience that are not aware, and then we carry on with the story.
And maybe I should close the gap from the end of the 90s to 2013, just in 2-3 sentences, because this also brought us to Allotrope. So we worked as a system integrator. So we were very experienced in our life science R&D. So we, as Ostus, we worked for big pharma and did projects for BASF and Bayer, the compound logistics systems, dealing with all the compound logistics in research, all the substances, which has a lot to do with processes, process automation, workflows, substance handling, inventory stuff, and with these systems, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people were involved who worked with these software solutions, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we created other systems, synthesis systems, ELN or LIMS systems, but this was more customized or integrating with products. So we were usually the general contractors.
Great, and I have to say it makes perfect sense that kind of work will be done by Germans, because you guys are very much known for process, accuracy, quality, etc., which fits very well into automating them, right? Because things happen in organized fashion, and obviously these are dangerous national stereotypes. I'm Spanish, so we have a completely different reputation, which I don't think is always deserved. But great, that fills the gap for us. Although anybody who knows me will probably agree that the Spaniards can be chaotic, at least on the evidence of Santi.
I think it's maybe a cultural thing, but also even more a personal thing. And I like to deal with complexity and turn this into smart systems. And this is what we did. And looking then in our space, we worked a lot in the laboratory spaces, as you can imagine. And when Allotrope made this RFP or RFI, they were asking finally about integrating instruments and LIMS to a standard and a data standard. And we had an expert, a semantics expert in our company at that time. We already worked in these areas. So Allotrope was about, going back to your question, they wanted to invent a vendor-neutral format. Because the issue that they were facing is that the FDA wanted to have access to the raw data. This was an upcoming topic, right? It was not fixed, but it was an upcoming topic, and they wanted to be prepared.
I think it's been upcoming for a long time, but
Yes. But as you can see now, it's more or less in place. That this request is coming up, and this was about long-term archiving. And the problem was that, as you can imagine, there were hundreds to dozens to hundreds of vendors, thousands of software components. Even within the vendors, sometimes the software components were not compatible and didn't speak the same language sometimes. And this was a big threat for the pharma companies. And that's why they asked for this data standard, allotrope data standard, to harmonize this, to standardize this, to make this vendor neutral. Yeah, and then we went into this RFI, RFP, and finally the small, as you say, German company made it to Washington, D.C. instead of the big consulting companies, and we won the project. And this was a big step for us. And this was, I think, the first step towards digitalization, because it was all about data.
Yes, that's right. I mean, basically, I think it was about one common language for all the different data inputs that you can get from all the different instruments, etc. And at that time, I think is when I became aware of Ostus, because obviously in MestreLab, as you know, we also process data from different vendors and turn it into, in this case, our own proprietary format so that we can operate on it. But obviously what you guys were doing was much bigger, because you were actually opening the format to the world in a way, right? By creating one standard human readable open format that could then be operated on by anyone else, right? Yeah. Which is maybe where the concept is a bit different to what MestreLab was doing. But I do remember meeting with some of your guys in some of the Allotrope conferences, because in a way we have some of the same challenges, which is dealing with the output that the vendor instruments generate.
Yeah. And at the beginning, just as an anecdote, the vendors didn't take care of this initiative. So they thought, oh, let's do them some stuff. But then after 7 or 8 months, one guy told me, and sorry I'm saying this, but this was the original speech, shit, you're taking this serious. because we showed the integration of Empower and another software supplier between Merck and GSK. So then they saw, wow, this is a serious initiative. And what I really like, and this idea was not our original idea, so this came really from the guys from the industry. We just helped to implement this, was the question of how can we make this traceable, all the data across the whole workflow, not only with one instrument, not with 10 instruments, not within one lab or 10 labs, across the life cycle of a substance and a compound. And even, if you get even further, you're talking about clinical trials and all this stuff. And this was really for us a very innovative thought. And then we turned this into a concept of the self-reporting data asset, where we said, okay, you start at a certain point, you invent a compound, and then you do over years, sometimes you do experiments with a substance, with compound, you get results, and then sometimes it stays there, then half a year later you continue, but you want to trace this, and you track this across the life cycle and also across the workflows. And this concept was really very innovative, besides the vendor neutral format. And we implemented this finally as a allotrope data format. And it's funny, but a year ago, when I was at a conference, one of a top management guy at a pharma company, we did a workshop. So it was just Ostus or SciY or Zontel. It was just a big group. He said, wow, a vision would be if we could. And then he talked about the they called it data set. Self-reporting data set. I could tell him, yeah, that's great, but the vision is reality. Because what we did with Zontel, so now I'm maybe speaking to one of the companies that we created, then as an outcome of the Allotrope initiative, which created then the implementation of this self-reporting data asset. And I think this goes now back to the digitalization topic, to the question.
Mhm. Yeah, which to me
Because-
is I think absolutely. I mean, this is truly digitalization, right? Because you're basically taking a diverse environment which is not readily accessible digitally. So it generates digital entities, but they are all disconnected and not accessible and in different places, sitting in instruments, in computers, in labs, in different silos. And this is about bringing everything together. But I think it's important well beyond that, right? And obviously this guy that you're talking about in that conference had a value in mind when he was looking for these self-reporting data assets. So, why is digitalization so important? And this common self-reporting data asset, why is it so valuable?
Yep, there are a couple of things. First of all, data centricity is a core principle, which is then part of this. As an outcome from a business perspective, the most modern relevant business impact is that you are making data ready for AI.
Okay.
And you can put this in different brackets. One is you want to simulate experiments. So everyone in the pharma industry knows, and we know this also from data lake projects, shit in, shit out. If you did in the past, you did data warehouse projects, then they went to data lakes and they thought this is even better, but it stays shit in, shit out. So it's always the same problem. And if you have good metadata, and if you have this concept of raw data, metadata in a self-reporting data asset concept, then you have this traceability and you have always the contextual data available. And if you have this, you then have the data in a good state that you can do simulations. And everyone wants to go away from real experiments. Everyone wants to go into simulation. But the prerequisite for this is the quality of the data. Yeah,
that's right. Because I think there are a lot of very good technologies now to let's use the general term machine learning, and let's not get into the semantics of whether that's exactly the right term, etc. But yeah, there are very good technologies for doing machine learning, but for the critical limiting factor there, the limiting reagent in a way for the chemists that are listening, is probably that quality of the data that you're going to machine learn on, right? And quality doesn't only mean the accuracy and its reflection of the reality, of the experimental reality, but also the structure of the data and its ability to be exploited by these systems, right? So I think when you think about this as AI readiness, then the value to the business, I totally agree. I mean, in the end of the day, experimentation is very expensive and very slow, right? And I think the industries that we operate in have a challenge. The challenge is that to take a new compound all the way from idea to commercialization is a very long and very expensive road, right? And the reason why it is so long and so expensive is that all the experiments that you have to carry out to get the compound to that point. So I think it's a huge opportunity for our industry to be able to shorten this process and to reduce its cost and environmental cost, by the way, by being able to simulate as opposed to experiment, right? Which is what you're referring to.
Yes, yes. And maybe tying back now to the second part of where and why I started this digitalization journey was then 2014. This is one Barcelona in Spain, by the way.
Okay.
The IT Expo is Symposium. IT Expo Symposium, right? That's the name of the Gartner Symposium, which happens each year. And this was the first time, 2014, where Michael Chandler, so the life science guy from Gartner, gave a presentation. Drug becomes digital, no more analog. at that time, there was a lot of IoT, smart things, and data and systems connectivity in there. But what I took away from me, because I saw wallpapers of system landscapes at customers, and I thought, what the hell are they doing with these big wallpapers? No one can read this through. So for me, my takeaway was my focus is on data. But even data is broad. So I thought, what data are relevant? Data for decision making, data that are relevant for time to market, and data that are relevant for innovation. And you think about these directions of data, then it's you can think about it. Why digitalization makes a lot of sense, because for process automation, you need the contextual data that could automate. If you want to make predictive maintenance, you need to have the contextual data, even and the result or experimental data to judge on predictive maintenance. And if you want to drive decisions in your lead stage or candidate stage or in early research, whenever you have these development stages of a drug, you have a bunch of different information that you need to connect to make, and now again back to data, informed and data-driven decision making. And this is the most important topic. There you can then use AI in addition. That's excellent, but you need to have these data dependencies and alignments accurate in place. And this is a big topic for the companies. And there's a reason why, coming to another valuation, why some companies in their valuation who are in the stock market are valued by 2 times, 3 times more, have a better valuation, just because they are seen as a data-driven and a digital company.
Yes, well, that's very interesting. I hadn't appreciated that this made such a difference to the company valuation, but to me, it makes a lot of sense, because I think what that is telling the investor is that this company's future research will be much faster and productive than the previous research, right? Because it will be building, and obviously, given that particularly in the biopharma industry, research and development is the most expensive part of the process and the one that prevents you from getting revenue, right? Then that's very important. And yeah, I think there are a lot of applications where there is a lot of potential value to the customers. And I guess you guys operationalize this through the company called Sontal, right? Which
Yes.
it's basically, in a way, I think we could say that it is delivering that self-describing data asset to companies. Is that a
That's a fair statement.
fair statement? And I use fair with a double meaning, by the way, for
Yeah,
those that are into
that's a fair and
scientific
fair
data.
statement. It's a double fair
Yes.
statement.
Yes, double fair statement. So this is a joke that obviously would not work in your standard pub, because nobody will understand the second meaning. But those who are into scientific data know that findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable is one of the ways in which we define making data more valuable by ensuring that it is in the right format, properly annotated, etc., so that we can get more value, secondary value out of it, right? So yeah, when you're looking at that, Torsten, how do you enable, through Sontal, you enable the pharma industry to become this kind of learning organization, right, in a way, or to build knowledge and use it in a different way. I'm very interested in that concept. I'm also interested in the difficulties along the way. So obviously there are a lot of, maybe one question that I have is, what are the main things that one has to get right? And why typically does a pharma company not do this themselves? but rely on a partner such as Sontal to do it? You know, what are the real hurdles that we have to go over to be in that position where then we can get all that value that you were talking about?
Yeah, first of all, we are not talking about a tool, we are talking about a platform,
Mm-hmm.
a digitalization platform. And then we are talking about maybe 10,000 of instruments. We are talking about a range of LIMS or ELN systems within the company. That doesn't mean that everything in a whole enterprise is solved at the beginning, but it means you need to have something that can deal with the complexity, with the scalability, and also to have this data centricity concept in the architecture, in the core architecture, in its core. So, and a digitalization platform is nothing that you can just develop on your own. We know a couple of companies who try to build something on their own, but finally, I don't know any project that didn't fail. So usually they can solve a specific problem, and for this problem, that's fine. But you're thinking about a platform that covers many kinds of instrument types. You think about also the complexity of data, and then dealing with amounts of data in terms of terabytes of data in one file, imaging data as an example. If you think about these different types of instruments, and you know better than I some very complex instrument types which bring out very complex multi-dimensional arrays of data. This is really a very difficult topic to solve. And you can also look at the markets. So there have been a couple of companies on the vendor side who tried to solve this problem. And we know that even some who started this are struggling and struggling in delivering the digitalization platform for the industry. So it's not a simple thing, I want to say. Yeah.
No, I think in a way, scale really matters, right? Because it's a problem. I think it's a problem of scale. That's right, you know. And for me, that's interesting because we see this happening in different companies, and sometimes we see these in-house developed solutions. But the challenge that the customer has there is that they are doing all that heavy lifting only for one organization, right? And I guess by having a vendor agnostic partner in the middle of the industry like Sontal is, you're actually leveraging the fact that the work is being done for a number of different companies, which means that obviously you can benefit from an integration or a development that you do for one benefit. You can benefit and leverage that so you build faster and you can put sufficient resource to it, right? Because I think you guys are kind of at the 100 people size when tackling this problem. And, Sontal is now part of the SciY organization, right? It's something bigger where we have about 300 people and about 120 people actually developing in this direction.
Yes. That's a great thing to be part of this SciY story, because now, which is goes back to my dream, which is not only a Sontal dream, which is a more, how can we enable the industry to leverage their data and to leverage the knowledge out of their data and make the best outcome for, as I said, time to market, decision making, and innovation. And this for me is very, very important. This is customer centric, data centric, and not vendor centric. And with SciY, since I know that SciY is developing this end-to-end vision across the pharma value chain, this is for me an exciting story.
And yeah, I totally agree, Torsten. And I guess you there mentioned end to end, which I guess the picture a little bit goes from that very initial concept, ideation of a new compound or whatever, all the way to market, right? So the platforms that you guys are developing are actually aiming to cover this whole journey. And I think also, maybe, and just for clarity, I would think that this concept is not only relevant to the pharma industry, right? So it's a little wider than that. So can you just maybe comment on that a little bit? I mean, obviously, I think Allotrope is quite pharma focused, but maybe not pharma only. And you did mention BASF earlier in the conversation, which is not a biopharma company as such, right?
Yeah. Let me put it this way. Yes, it's very much usable and valuable for any company who is working on chemistry, R&D, and so I keep out biology now at that moment. And the good thing is, from the Zonto perspective, we solved the most complex business case with pharma. So
Which
that's
is?
why for us going to other industries is a home play. It's
Okay.
it's
Okay.
a home run. So it's
yeah, and I guess pharma is the most complex because it has the greatest variety of instruments and systems, right? If I understand right,
and processes because it's
right.
all about humans and patients. So there's a lot of regulation in there.
Right.
So
Right.
this is in other industries it's easier, but they have the same issue. They have data. They are lacking of metadata and connectivity and alignment of the data, and also the instruments finally, and the LIMS and the LN systems. It's the same story, simpler to solve, but finally it's the same story because they will also want to do AI on top of their data.
Mm-hmm. And maybe just picking up on that, on doing AI on top of the data, and something that you mentioned earlier, Torsten, and this is where the conversation gets a little dangerous. You were talking about time to market, right? And how short can it get? You were talking about time to market. You were talking about dreaming. So
Yeah.
what how far do you think we can get as we travel down this road? What is a good aspirational aim to have?
I'm not so I'm not a pharma expert in terms of I'm not from the business side, so I'm
No,
coming
you're a
from
data
engineering.
expert rather, right?
I'm coming from engineering, so that's why I cannot really judge on it. But what I can see, what's happening if we can turn real experiments into more simulations, this will have a big impact, a multiplier in time, in reduction of time efforts. If we can deal with regulatory submission with structured authoring and structured data instead of documents, and pushing data around from data to documents and from documents back to data and then back to documents before it goes to regulatory submission. And then if we can cross the line from R&D to manufacturing, and even maybe pharma to pharmacovigilance, data driven, I think we can reduce it by 3 to 4 times.
Which
there's a lot of work that is manual work, which is data conversion, data integration, in data processing. And when I talk about data, it's just more about data. It's data, documents, and documents at any places, any areas. So I'm saying this because I did a couple of startups to support the industry. And the second one is working on a digital registry for terms and entities and this is really crazy that this is still an issue. The issue is that people are dealing with the same terms and concepts across R&D, manufacturing, but the understanding is different, so that they have synonyms, but they have totally different concepts. That's why they cannot connect between R&D and manufacturing. So that's why I think, from what I saw, working with these pharma companies, with their integration issues between the different functions within the pharma value chain, I would assume it has a big impact.
Yeah, and I can see that you're not totally comfortable giving us specific numbers, and I fully understand that. I sometimes kind of, obviously not totally seriously, talk about taking the ideation to commercialization to a 30-minute process, which conceptually you could see how it could be possible if everything was done through simulation and simulations were fast. But I think we're obviously that's something that's never going to happen. But the statement that you kind of reluctantly made, accelerating by a factor of 3 or 4 has an incredible impact, right? Because
yes,
we're talking about a compound taking probably about 10 to 12 years to get to market from its inception. We're talking about a process costing in the hundreds of millions of dollars. In some cases, it can be, obviously depending on the type of trials, etc., that need to be done. It can be over $1 billion. And if we were able to cut that by a factor of 3, we will be getting compounds to market 7 or 8 years earlier, right? And there is obviously a very obvious impact to the patients that are waiting for those compounds. Also, obviously, to the industry from a return on investment perspective. And also, I think it has a very obvious implication to the in-patent period, right? When the industry is able to commercialize with the protection of a patent, which is that period starts shortening as soon as you patent a compound. So in a way, by shortening that research and development, you're also extending that commercialization period where the returns can be generated, which would mean that we will also be able to make treatments much more accessible from an economic perspective, right? Both to the patient or to the health systems, which are fairly challenged these days, especially when we look at what's going on with demographics, which is great. We all can hope and expect to live longer than we used to, but that does have an impact on the health system. So I think it's very exciting. I mean, what's your perspective, Torsten, on maybe? I'm interested also on the concept of artificial intelligence downstream, right? Because let's say that what I've taken from the conversation so far is that we build AI on top of the digitalization that you guys, for example, are working on with Sontel, right? And you cannot have good AI without the digitalization, the shit in, shit out that you were referring to earlier. How ready is AI if we get the digitalization right? Yeah, which is obviously what you guys are working on. Is AI ready to exploit, let's say, this kind of data to really start accelerating? Is that something that you see happening in the industry already? Are there, let's say, successful use cases?
Yes, there are. I have one example, which is about drug shortage.
Okay.
So I give you an example where, and this is, by the way, a very interesting one, because this goes even further than large language models or generative AI. Because the problem of generative AI at the moment is it's fuzzy. And we have one project where the EMA has an issue, several issues, and the pharma companies as well, the politicians are asking for predictions of drug shortages.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that the pharma companies are delivering their drugs localized in different countries. And each country has different structures, different concepts, maybe even different terms and wordings of the drug and namings. And the EMA has also local authorities, and they cannot get the data together. It's impossible at the moment. And within this project, what we are creating is a knowledge graph which makes sure that if I say Santi, that it's clear that it's you, Santi Dominguez,
Mm-hmm.
as a person.
Yeah.
So really identifying the real entity and then combining such a knowledge graph. And this is, by the way, what we are doing with the instrument ontologies and the MethodDB at SciY and Zontel. This exact match of data and data alignments, and then combining this knowledge graph with the large language model. If you do this and ask them a question, and if you want to find data and identify the drug shortage as an example, you can do this just by a click. That's possible because it becomes exact.
Yes, well, I think what you're doing basically is taking all the ambiguity out of the system, right? So that,
yes.
And this is when when large language models become really powerful, right? When the data set that they're built on is fully unambiguous and can be clearly searched, mined, and categorized. No, that's a very interesting example, actually, because I spend most of my time in the kind of research and early development side of the pharma industry, but here we're actually talking product and marketing away, right? And we're talking about the complexity of the over 200 national geographies, probably over thousands and thousands of regional geographies, and different software systems, different nomenclatures and labelings and languages, obviously, etc.
Yeah, that's okay. That's very broad. I agree. You can take it also back to predictive maintenance, and where you want to identify a change of a sensor or filling up some materials. So this is also a very interesting topic. Or what was even in the mind of Allotrope in the early days, to create a dashboard where you want to see how the instruments are used across the organization, and maybe to reallocate substances and experiments to have a better situation how you use the instruments and maybe this could also help you to decide on buying new instruments or getting rid of instruments. So this is also from the pharma side a relevant topic, I would assume.
Right. Yeah, because of course an awful amount of capital equipment is tied into these laboratories, right? And it's any optimization on the use that we make of it has again a very significant economic impact. Very interesting.
And then we talked, but then we also talked about these generative AI models that are available from academia, and that we maybe then combine these generative AI models about predictions and compare them or combine them with internal pharma data, because a pharma company would never ever publish their data for doing trainings of large language models. But if they can use the model and connect it with Zontel and then just process the data through the model, and keep this internal. This is also a very interesting opportunity.
Well, I think that would be hugely powerful, right? Because in the past, academics, I mean, and that's the difference. Like you say, pharma will never publish the data for use with large language models for obvious reasons. It's basically their IP is central to the business, right? But academia sits on the other side of the fence, right? Academia actually have a mandate to publish the results and to make them useful for society, and I think in the past, and this is a concept that I'm also very interested in, which is that academics publish for humans, right? And that means that a very small percentage of the work that they do is actually published, typically the stuff that work the best, because humans have a limited capacity to consume information, right? So I may have, let's say in an organic synthesis lab, I may have run 1,000 reactions and I may publish the 4 that work the best that go into my paper or my patent. And this is because my readers cannot consume the 1,000 reactions. But the information as to all the reactions that didn't work with the different conditions, the different combinations of reagents, etc., would be equally as valuable, if not more, as the information of what worked, right? Because it is, for example, preventing somebody somewhere else wasting time, materials, energy, and effort into running the same reaction when we already know it's not going to work. So, in a way, I guess that these platforms, these digitalization platforms, give us the opportunity to really move that publication mandate on from human readers to machine readers, right? And that would, I think that's a very nice concept, a kind of Amazon or a kind of publisher for machines, which will be doing the simulations and the research in the pharmaceutical industries.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
I think it opens all this opens a fascinating world, and maybe I'm gonna jump back a little bit, Torsten. I think we have explored very nicely obviously the self-reporting data asset, all these kind of concepts and the potential that they have. I'm maybe interested on that point when you guys were in consultancy and suddenly Sontal was created, right? So at this point, with your co-founder in Sontal, Wolfgang Kolsman.
Yeah.
You guys were working with Allotrop, and what drove you to make that decision that a project like Sontal was needed? What was the driver behind that?
The solution, there was no solution on the market,
Mm-hmm.
and Allotrop didn't have the money to build a solution for that. And we knew that this is a huge business case, an important business case for the industry, not only in archiving, not only in long-term archiving, but also in the digitalization of the companies. So becoming data-centric. And this is where we decided we will invest into this. And then we started to work with some customers. This was painful for us and for the customers, I think, at the beginning. So, to be very honest, but finally, and this is for me a cultural thing, we were always result driven and learning driven. So it was all about improving, creating results, And what we also, and this was, I think, a good thing for us, we didn't come from, so we didn't create a software without without a huge knowledge in software architecture. So we did already so-called SOA architectures at large companies, so service-oriented architectures. So we knew how to build an enterprise-level architecture that's scalable and performs. And that's also usable by thousands of people. So that's why I think we were in a good position to create an architecture and finally a system that has a platform character. Yeah, I think this is, and then we had the right mindset. Because for us it was important to have this self-describing data asset, to consider the concept of data centricity, to stay vendor agnostic, and not to become the center of the world. So I think it's important to support this, but trying to support the industry and not that someone want to be the center of the world. So that I can do everything with my software. So you call it in English, jack of all trades.
Yes,
No,
master of none.
Yeah, this is what we never intended. That's why we created this operational layer and the data hub layer, and that we created this application framework where anyone can contribute and create an application on top of the platform. And finally we created an ecosystem. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I guess allows your customers, for example, to build their own applications, leveraging the platform that you guys are delivering, right? And
yes,
and their contractors, other software vendors, etc. Which again, I think I very much like as a concept, because I think it's too big a problem for one organization to tackle, right? Going back again to the scale question that we were talking about before. And
yeah, they couldn't do this. 11 pharma companies, no one was capable to do it, and 11 from the top 20. So we're not talking about 11, we are talking about 11 from the top 20. And then to bring your question to one point, so Wolfgang and I were entrepreneurs. We saw a problem of the whole entire industry that wasn't solved. We just needed to step into this, and then it's the question of, do we want to take the risk? And we took the risk.
Yeah, and I think so far it seems to be paying on handsomely, both for you and for the industry. So I think that was probably a good decision. Hopefully you agree, but that's what it looks like from the outside. I'm very amused, Thorsten, by the concept that the pharma industry didn't have the money to do it, so Wolfgang and you decided to do it, which
others came up who also were working on and also working on this, but I think we started to do this. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, very interesting. So my takeaways, I think, are obviously well, there are many, and very interesting, and I've learned a lot. But I think if I were to summarize, basically what we're saying is that before we can do AI and we can accelerate, AI has the potential to greatly accelerate, reduce costs, compress time to market, etc. But in order to do that, we need to have very good quality data, so no shit in, so that we don't get any shit out. And that relies on digitalizing whole ecosystems and bringing into one single structure or platform many different data sources with many different formats and flavors, etc. And this is something that the industry needs in order to be able to leverage that automation, which is ultimately what we're aiming to do. And then when you're going to do that, architecture is fundamental, right? So this self data centric
self-reporting data asset, yeah, right.
Data centric concept, and this self-reporting data asset where all the relevant descriptors are attached to the data entry, so that you can always recognize it, is also very important. There is a huge amount there that needs to be gotten right, but if you get it right, the rewards are very big. So yeah, that's fascinating, Thorsten. Thank you very much. I think we've probably spoken a little longer than we typically do, but I have to say that for me this subject is, well, you could speak about this for years, right? And there will still be new things to talk about. So and I'm very excited by what I think is going to be coming to the industry as a result of the efforts that companies like Sontal are making. And I would encourage the listeners to, certainly check out what you guys are doing. If anyone who is listening who is interested in the AI in AI enabling their organization, I think taking a look at what Central are doing is a very good place to start, because you do need to get that fundamental foundation right. And I'm a little bit scared to ask you what next, Torsten. You know, what whether there are any future projects that you have in mind, any areas that where you may be starting up again. I don't know whether that's something you're happy to talk about, or
So
whether you see any obvious problems where, again, the industry needs help.
yeah, sure. I have my masterpiece. So we worked on data governance, data management, data analytics, digitalization topics with our startups. And my last project, or that's not my last, but my masterpiece, I would say, is if people, teams, and organizations want to ride the wave of AI and not to be overwhelmed, they also need to pick it up from their knowledge perspective and from their change culture and their culture of adopting all the stuff that's coming up with AI, which will be huge. It's even faster and more accelerating than digitalization is. And this is my ambition to support, or let's say to empower people, teams, and organizations that they can ride the wave of AI. And this is for me all about know-how, knowledge, and the culture of innovation. Yeah, and that's my next project. Yes.
Yeah, and again, you know, it's very, very rare that you talk to anyone about this subject, and change management is not a fundamental part of successfully delivering these improvements and accelerations. So that's super relevant as well, I think. Okay, so thank you very much, Torsten. It's been really interesting and really fun. That was Torsten Ostus from, well, in amongst others, Sontal, Ostus GmbH, etc. I think clearly a very knowledgeable entrepreneur who has been going at neural networks and AI for a very long time. I hadn't appreciated that. And the conversation today was mainly about digitalization and its applicability to AI and the value to the industry. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to having you join us again for the next episode of the series, which we will be announcing in the coming few weeks. Torsten, thank you very much for your time. Really interesting discussion.
Thank you very much, Santi. It was a pleasure talking to you. Bye bye.
Likewise. Goodbye. You can find all MestreCast episodes at iVoox, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. And you can, of course, follow us in our MestreLab media channels on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So please follow us, share us, and we look forward to seeing you attending future episodes.